I'm your host, Davina Shinsky, and you're listening to Live Without Limits, the Dreams Come True with the Right Mindset. Today's presentation is what does emotional invalidation sound like and 12 statements. We've all been in a situation where we didn't feel understood, and that's okay. But when someone starts saying statements like, it's not as bad as you're making it out to be, or it's not that big a deal, you can feel even more upset and unheard. It's as though the other person is saying that your feelings don't matter or that your feelings are wrong. This, my friends, is called emotional invalidation. Now, I can remember as a child my mother saying to me, "Why are you crying? You have no reason to cry." And many years later, she, I, she, I had not been in touch with her, and she knew, contacted someone that I knew to get in touch with her. And I wrote her a letter and I told her how I felt about the things she said to me. She goes, and then when I saw it, I was like, how can you say those things? Well, there were tears in my eyes as I was writing it, but it's what I was feeling about how she always invalidated me and who I was or the feelings that I had. And she and I were never close. And when she died, I knew that I had made attempts to try to make peace with her, but she was never willing to meet me halfway. And the only tears I shed for her were the fact that we never made peace with each other. Here's the thing, your feelings are real, even if you're misunderstanding another person's intention or don't have all the facts straight. Not accepting another's feelings can really throw a wrench into resolving conflict or truly getting to the bottom of why a person feels the way they feel. I can even hinder our understanding of ourselves. So, how do you know if someone is using emotional invalidation? What efforts does this have? And most importantly, what can you do about it? What are the effects of emotional invalidation in relationships? Oftentimes, a person invalidates another's emotions because they can't process them. Maybe they are overwhelmed in their own life or they are unsure how to respond. However, emotional invalidation can also be used as an argument strategy to gain control or power over another. If you've ever been emotionally invalidated, you know exactly how small this can make you feel, whether it's intentional or not. Yes, emotional invalidation can be unintentional and doesn't always have an underlying evil plan behind it. So, what effects can emotional invalidation have in relationships? Well, it can lead to a few problems, including difficulty with establishing a personal identity. When we believe our emotions are wrong, we may struggle to regulate them and struggle to develop good self esteem. Emotional dysregulation, when we are told we aren't supposed to feel a certain way, it can invariably create varying degrees of confusion and distrust in ourselves. It can lead us to question, overly so. Sometimes it's good to question ourselves whether we are right to feel this way or not. It can lead you to feel lost and confused as to what you're feeling and how you should feel. So remember, We're talking about emotional invalidation here. And when someone denies you the right to feel what you're feeling, then they're invalidating who you are and the way you feel. Depression and anxiety invariably all of this can lead you to feel like you're walking on eggshells and also leave you feeling anxious as to whether you're behaving or feeling right or wrong. It can also lead to behaving or feeling depression, where you don't feel worthy since you feel wrong. Poor self image in the long term, emotional invalidation is a route term. Developing a bad self image, you struggle to accept yourself, and it's almost impossible to change or even enjoy the moment when you can't accept yourself. Is invalidation a form of emotional abuse? The simple answer is yes. And I can tell you that in my home, my mother emotionally and verbally abused, constantly telling you what you couldn't do as opposed to what you could do. In fact, this can be one of the most damaging types of emotional abuse. It can lead to gaslighting, where a person feels as though they are losing their mind and are completely untrusting of what they perceive, feel, think, or see. It denies you of your individual experience. And as we said, it can be really impactful, causing declines in your mentality and well being, emotional invalidation examples. So, what does emotional invalidation actually sound like? Well, here is a list of statements. It's not as bad as you're making it out to be. It's not that big a deal. Stop overreacting. It can be worse. You're being too sensitive. Quit taking things so personally. I don't see the problem. That never happened. You shouldn't feel like that. I'm sorry you feel that way. Don't think about it. I don't want to have this discussion. And that's something my mother said almost every day. Her feeling was if you ignore the problem, it doesn't exist. Well, you want to know something? A problem will always exist, whether you admit it or not. At the same time, when it comes to emotional invalidation, context matters. For example, if it's close to bedtime and your spouse is tired and you're both winding down to go to sleep, saying, I don't want to have this discussion right now. Can we talk about it tomorrow? Is completely fine as long as it's actually discussed the next day. So, how do you respond to emotional invalidation? Getting emotionally invalidated is tough. You might be tempted to bite back and argue. This might not go over well. But there are other and better ways to go about responding to the above comments. When you hear the above emotional invalidation statement, it can be send you into the fight or flight mode. Stress hormones start pumping through your body. You're ready for a fight. Thus, it's important to leave room to pause, take a deep breath, or a few. Stop and think about how you want to respond. So, what is your goal? Why does this relationship matter? Sometimes it's from someone who doesn't necessarily have a close relationship with you, it can be easy to brush off and get that validation elsewhere. If you feel you want the person to know and you are close to them and their relationship matters, you can try saying something along the lines of, I feel like you're invalidating the way I feel. I don't need you to fix it or judge it. I just need you to listen to me right now. Another good way to approach it is by using I statements, such as when you blank, I feel blank. Other ways also include improving your own self esteem and coping skills. Knowing your worth goes a long way to here also. You can self validate and show yourself some self compassion. Another person's opinion or statement doesn't have to impact us. In truth, we can control whether it does or it doesn't. Plus, you don't have to stick around people that continually emotionally invalidate you. Find a community to surround yourself with that supports and lifts each other up. So rise above it. Being emotionally invalidated does not feel good. Your feelings are valid. Dr. Jamie Long has also said validation doesn't mean we agree with another subjective reality. Validation allows another person's emotional state to exist. In other words, we don't have to agree with one another in how we feel. Rather, we have to be able to make space for it and try to understand. Making space for each other's emotions allows us to bond, but it allows us to feel vulnerable and open with one another. Shutting someone down can lead to irreversible repercussions. So tread lightly and don't stand for others using emotional invalidation. So make your life what you want it to be. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is this. Often, what you find is that someone tends to almost repeat behaviors based on how they were raised because they don't know any other way to do something. But this is why it's so important to get therapy along the way, simply because in the past, this is how they were raised. And if you look over generations and the way they were raised and the things they said to each other and how they said it, they only knew how to be abusive. And often you have to disassociate yourself with those people if they don't want to change.